Part 3 of The Color of Magic. The twin city of Ankh-Morpork, foremost of all cities, bounding the Circle Sea, was as a matter of course the home of a large number of gangs, thieves, syndicates, and similar organizations. This was one of the reasons for its wealth. Most of the humbler folk on the Widdershins side of the river, in Morpork's mazy alleys, supplemented their meager income by filling some small role for one or the other of the competing gangs. So it was that by the time that Hugh and Two Flower entered the courtyard of the Broken Drum, the leaders of a number of these groups were aware that someone had arrived in the city who appeared to have a great deal of treasure. Some reports from the more observant spies included details about a book that told the stranger what to say, and a box that walked by itself. These facts were immediately discounted. No magician capable of such enchantments ever came within a mile of Morpork's docks. It still being that hour when most of the city was just rising, or about to go to bed, there were a few people in the drum to watch Two Flower descend the stairs. When the luggage appeared behind him and started to lurch confidently down the steps, the customers of the rough wooden tables, as one man looked suspiciously at their drinks. Broadman was browbeating the small troll who swept the bar when the trio walked past him. "What in the heck is that?" he said. "Just don't talk about it," hissed Hugh. Two Flower was already thumbing through his book. "What's he doing?" said Broadman, arms akimbo, which just means they're like... "It tells him what to say. I know it sounds ridiculous," muttered Hugh. "How can a book tell a man what to say?" said Broadman. "I wish for an accommodation, a room, lodgings, the lodging house full board. Are your rooms clean? A room with a view. What is your rate for one night?" said Two Flower in one breath. Broadman looked at Hugh. The beggar shrugged. "He's got plenty of money." "Tell him 3 copper pieces then, and that the thing will have to go in the stable," said the stranger. Broadman held up 3 thick fingers. The man's face was suddenly a sunny display of comprehension. He reached into his pouch and laid 3 gold pieces in Broadman's palm. Broadman stared at them. They represented about 4 times the worth of the Broken Drum, staff included. He looked at Hugh. There was no help there. He looked at the stranger. He swallowed. "Yes," he said in an unnaturally high voice. "And then there's meals, of course. You understand, yes? Food? You eat? No?" He made the appropriate motions. "Foot?" said the little man. "Yes," said Broadman, beginning to sweat. "Have a look in your little book. I should." The man opened the book and ran a finger down one page. Broadman, who could read after a fashion, peered over the top of the volume. What he saw made no sense. "Food," said the stranger. "Yes. Cutlet, hash chop, stew, ragout, fricassee, mince, collop, souffle, dumpling, blancmange, sorbet, gruel sausage, not to have a sausage, beans without a bean, kickshaws, jelly jam, giblets." He beamed at Broadman. "All that?" "It's just the way he talks," said Hugh. "Don't ask me why, he just does." All eyes in the room were watching the stranger, except for a pair belonging to Rincewind, the wizard, who was sitting in the darkest corner nursing a mug of very small beer. He was watching the luggage. Watch Rincewind. Look at him. Scrawny, like most wizards, and clad in a dark red robe on which a few mystic sigils were embroidered in tarnished sequins. Some might have taken him for a mere apprentice enchanter, who had run away from his master out of fear of defiance and a lingering taste for women. Yet around his neck was a chain bearing the bronze octagon that marked him as an alumnus of the Unseen University, the high school of magic whose time and space transcendent campus is never precisely here nor there. Graduates were usually destined for mageship, at least, but Rincewind, after an unfortunate event, had left knowing only one spell, and made a living of sorts around the town by capitalizing on an innate gift for languages. He avoided work as a rule, but had a quickness of wit that put his acquaintances in mind of a bright rodent. And he knew sapient pearwood when he saw it. And he was seeing it now, and he didn't quite believe it. An archmage, by dint of great effort and much expenditure of time, might eventually obtain a small staff made from the timber of the sapient pear tree. It grew only on sites of ancient magic. There were probably no more than 2 such staffs in all the cities of the Circle Sea. A large chest of it. Rincewind tried to work it out and decided that even if the box was crammed with star opals and sticks of auricoloidium, the contents would not be worth 1/10 the price of the container. A vein started to throb in the middle of his forehead. He stood up and made his way over to the trio. "May I be of assistance?" he ventured. "Shove off, Rincewind," snarled Broadman. "I only thought it might be useful to address the gentleman in his own tongue," said the wizard gently. "He's doing all right on his own," said the innkeeper, but took a few steps backwards. Rincewind smiled politely at the stranger, and tried a few words of Chimeran. He prided himself on his fluency in the tongue, but the stranger only looked bemused. "It won't work," said Hugh knowledgeably. "It's the book, you see. It tells him what to say. Magic." Rincewind switched to High Borogravian, to Vangelmesht, Sumitri, or even Black Urugu, the language which has no nouns and only 1 adjectives, and is completely obscene. Each was met with polite incomprehension. In desperation, he tried Heathen Trob, and the little man's face split into a grin. "At last," he said. "My good sir, this is remarkable." Although in Trob the last word is in fact became a thing which may happen but once in the usable lifetime of a canoe hollowed diligently by an axe and fire from the tallest diamondwood tree that grows in the noted diamondwood forest on the lower slopes of Mount Agawe, home of the fire gods, or so it is said. "What was all that?" said Broadman suspiciously. "What did the innkeeper say?" said the little man. Rincewind swallowed. "Broadman," he said, "2 mugs of your best ale, please." "You can understand him?" "Oh, sure." Tell him he's very welcome. Tell him breakfast is 1 gold piece." For a moment, Broadman's face looked as though some vast internal struggle was going on. And then he added with a burst of generosity, "I'll throw in yours too." "Stranger," said Rincewind levelly, "if you stay here, you will be knifed or poisoned by nightfall. But don't stop smiling, or so will I." "Oh, come on now," said the stranger, looking around. "This looks like a delightful place. A genuine Morporkian tavern. I've heard so much about them, you know. All these quaint old beams, and so reasonable, too." Rincewind glanced around quickly in case some leakage of enchantment from the magician's quarter across the river had momentarily transported them to some other place. No, this was still the interior of the drum, its walls stained with smoke, its floor a compost of old rushes and nameless beetles, its sour beer not so much purchased as hired for a while. He tried to fit the image around the word quaint, or rather the nearest Trob equivalent, which was that pleasant oddity of design found in coral houses of the spongy pygmies of the Orohai Peninsula. His mind reeled back from the effort. The visitor went on. "My name is Two Flower." He extended his hand. Instinctively, the other three looked down to see if there was a coin in it. "Pleased to meet you," said Rincewind. "I'm Rincewind. Look, I wasn't joking. This is a tough place." "Good! Exactly what I wanted!" "Eh? What is this stuff in the mugs?" "This? It's beer." "Thank you, Broadman. Yes, beer. You know, beer." "Ah, the so typical drink. A small gold piece will be sufficient payment, do you think? I don't want to cause offense." It was already half out of his purse. "You're..." croaked Rincewind. "I mean, no, it won't cause offense." "Good, you say this is a tough place. Frequented, you mean, by heroes? And men of adventure?" Rincewind considered this. "Yes," he managed. "Excellent! I want to meet some." An explanation occurred to the wizard. "Ah," he said, "you've come to hire some mercenaries. Warriors who fight for the tribe with the most milk nut meal in Trob." "Oh no, I just want to meet them so that when I get home I can say that I did." Rincewind thought that a meeting with most of the drum's clientele would mean that Toothflower would never go home again, unless he lived downriver and happened to float by. "Where is your home?" he inquired. Broadman had slipped away into the back room, he noticed. Hugh was watching them suspiciously from a nearby table, as Hugh would. He'd be... "Have you heard of the city of Bezpelargic?" "Well, I don't spend much time in Trob. I was just passing through, you know." "Oh, it's not in Trob. I speak Trob because there's many Betrobi sailors in our ports. Bezpelargic is the major seaport of the Agataean Empire." "Never heard of it, I'm afraid." Twoflower raised his eyebrows. "No? It's quite big. You sail turnwise from the Brown Islands for about a week, and there it is." "Are you all right?" He hurried around the table and patted the wizard on the back. Rincewind choked on his beer. "The counterweight continent." 3 streets away, an old man dipped a coin into a saucer of acid and swirled it gently. Broadman waited impatiently, ill at ease in a room made by noisome vats and bubbling beakers and lined with shelves containing shapes suggestive of skulls and stuffed impossibilities. "Well?" he demanded. "One cannot hurry these things," said the old alchemist peevishly. "A thing takes time." "Ah." He prodded the saucer, where the coin now lay in a swirl of green colors. He made some calculations on a scrap of parchment. "Exceptionally interesting," he said at last. "Is it genuine?" The old man pursed his lips. "It depends on how you define the term," he said. "If you mean is the coin the same as, say, a $50 piece, the answer is no." "I knew it!" screamed Broadman, and started towards the door. "I'm not sure I'm making myself clear," said the alchemist, and the innkeeper turned around angrily. "What do you mean?" "Well, you see, with one thing and another, our coinage has been watered over the years. The gold content of our coin is barely 4 parts in 12, the balance being made up of silver, copper." "What of it?" "I said this coin isn't like ours. It's pure gold." After Broadman had left at a run, the alchemist spent some time staring at the ceiling. Then he pulled out a very small, thin piece of parchment, rummaged for a pen, and wrote a very short, small message. Then he went over to his cages of white doves, black cockerels, and other laboratory animals. From one cage he removed a glossy-coated rat, rolled the parchment into a file attached to its hind leg, and let the animal go. It sniffed around the floor for a moment, then disappeared down a hole into the far wall. At about this time, a hitherto unsuccessful fortune teller living on the other side of the block chanced to glance into her scrying bowl, gave a small scream, and within the hour had sold her jewelry, various magical accoutrements, most of her clothes, and almost all her other possessions that could not be conveniently carried on the fastest horse that she could buy. The fact that later on, when her house collapsed in flames, she herself died in a freak landslide in Moorpork Mountains proves that death, too, has a sense of humor. And we'll pause there. Nighty night.